Okay, so we're going to be working through lesson 8, which is just going to be a review on the 4 different methods of factoring that we did. So what I want you to do on page 373, look down to where it has this chart here, and we're going to make some notes on here and do some examples. So when you get a question, remember that all of your questions will simply say factor. That's all they're going to say. They're not going to tell you the method of factoring, GCF, difference of squares, inspection, decomposition. It's just going to say factor. If you are told to factor, the very first thing you do is you look for a GCF, always. Okay? So before you do any type of factoring, you always say to yourself, is there a GCF? So for example, if you saw 5x squared plus 25x, before you try to figure out, is this PSA 1, PSA 2, difference of squares, you say, can I take out a GCF? And this question here would be a factoring by GCF. And Ainsley, what would be the GCF of those two terms? 5x. So whatever your GCF is, you put a division bar underneath each term, and the GCF gets written underneath each term. The GCF then goes in front of a bracket, and the answer will go in your bracket. So when you complete this division, Aiden, what would you get in the bracket? Yep, 1x plus 5. So 5 divided by 5 is 1x plus, here the x's will cancel, and 5. That is your completed answer. You have factored it. Your answer actually has two different factors. 5x is one factor. And then what's in the bracket would be your second factor. So 1x plus 5, or I'm actually going to erase that invisible 1 because that would be on your test. If it was multiple choice, it would just be x plus 5. GCF is always first. Second thing, you're going to say, if there's no GCF, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, if there's two terms, so let's box in two terms, what you're going to check for is it going to be a difference of squares? So for example, 4x squared plus 25. This is two terms, but I can't sorry. What do I need to do? 4x squared, it should be minus 25. So first thing again, don't just assume it's a difference of squares. This is going to be a difference of squares, but say to yourself, can I take out a GCF? So is there a greatest common factor between a 4 and a 25? There's not. So then you say, okay, two terms separated by a minus, that was called a difference of squares. So if it's a difference of squares and you identify it to be a difference of squares, what you do is you set up your two brackets, and your first bracket is going to get the square root of 4x squared, which one would be what? Sorry? 2x. And then Michaela, the square root of 25 is 5. One gets a plus and one gets a minus. That's difference of squares. What I'm going to do is we're going to do one more. And this was one of the questions on your quiz, and it was a difference of squares question. So this was version B. Write down 2x squared minus 128. So 2x squared minus 128. So again, two terms separated by a minus, but you always look for the GCF first. And the GCF just in P in this example would be what? Would be a 2. So you're going to factor out that 2. The 2 goes in front of the bracket, and the answer goes in the bracket. 2 divided by 2 is 1x squared. And then 128 divided by 2, does anybody know what that would be? 64. Is that what you said? Okay. 64. You then look at your bracket and you say, can I factor this bracket? And this bracket would then be a difference of squares, right? You could take the square root of 1x squared, and you could take the square root of 64. So a lot of you, what you forgot to do on the test, a lot of you did this correctly. You set up your two brackets, And you said, okay, the square root of 1x squared is 1x. You said the square root of 64 is 8. You did your plus and your minus. And what did you forget? Yes, the factor in front, which was the 2. That's why this question would be worth 3 marks, because there's 3 different factors. 2 is a factor, uh, x minus 8 is a factor, and x plus 8 is a factor. Okay, if you have 4 terms, so I'll do an example of 4 terms. 4 terms is something called group factoring. So an example of 4 terms would be 6x squared minus 9x minus 2x plus 3. What you do to those 4 terms is you split them in half. And you say to yourself, what can I factor out of a 6x squared and a 9x? What was it? 3x. Whatever you could factor out goes in front of the bracket, and then the answer would go in the bracket. Um, Serena, what answer would you get when you do the division here? Yes, 2x minus 3. X and X will cancel. You then go to your right-hand side and you say, what's the biggest number that you could factor out of a 2 and out of a 3? So Angel, what would be the biggest number you could factor out of a 2 and a 3? A 1. Is it a plus 1 or a minus 1? It'd be a negative 1. It would be whatever this guy is. And then you'd say negative 2 divided by negative 1, that is 2x. Here you have a positive divided by a negative, which would give you a negative 3. Remember that this is what you want to see. You want to see 2 brackets that are the same. That means you've done it correctly. You then factor out that 2x minus 3, and that's one of your factors. Tristan, what would be my remaining factor? 3x minus 1. Okay, so that's what you're going to do if you have 4 terms. If you have 3 terms, it's going to be a trinomial, and it is either going to be a PSA 1 question or it's going to be a PSA 2 question. And we'll review this PSA 1 and PSA 2 on the next page. And that's it. Those are your 4 types that you need to know. So let's flip the page. There's only one class example. Yes. I'll show you right after this. Right after this. Yeah, I will show you a perfect square. Actually, I'll show it. I'll make one in this video. That's a good idea. Okay, so let's do this guy. What do you guys think? 2 terms separated by a minus. What will this be? It's going to be a difference of squares. But before you square root the 9 and 36, and they could both be square rooted, what should you always check for? GCF. There is going to be a GCF here. Do you know what it would be? It's not going to be 3. It's going to be 9. Let's see what happens if we take a GCF of 9 out. So create your 2 division bars. If we factor out a 9, put the 9 in front of the bracket. 9 divided by 9 is 1x squared. What is 36 divided by 9? Yeah. Then say, okay, am I done factoring or could I factor more? Difference of squares right here. So you would set up your 2 brackets and you would say, what's the square root of 1x squared? 1x. Because remember the square root of 1 is 1. What's the square root of 4? It is 2. One factor would get a positive and one would get a negative. It does not matter which. And then you would bring your 9 down. And you'd box that in. This would have been worth 3 marks. What I want to show you, and I want you to do this just at the top of this page, here's what a lot of you would have done. 9x squared minus 36. a lot of you would have looked at that and said that's a difference of squares, which is correct. You would have set up your two brackets, and you would have said, what's the square root of 9x squared? 3x. What's the square root of 36? 6. Positive and negative. This is correct, but it's actually not factored completely. Because what can you factor out of a 3x and a 6? A 3, right? So watch what happens. If I factor out a 3, right, 3 goes in front of the bracket, and I would get 1x plus 2, right? So here's one of my answers, 1x plus 2. What would I factor from this bracket? A 3 goes in front of your bracket, and you'd get 1x minus 2. And then how they get the 9 is, this is all multiplication. So 3 times 3 would give you 9, right? So if I had done this question on the test, like, I just would look at it. I know I should take it to GCF first, right? But I would be like, oh, you could square root 9. You could square root 36. I would have done this. If it was a multiple choice question, I would have caught myself in the multiple choice because this wouldn't have been an answer, right? But if it was a long answer, you'd have to see that you could still GCF from this point to get that answer. Okay, here's our trinomial. Our A value is a 1. This is a PSA 1 question. So product, sum, and answer. You're looking for the product, if it's a PSA 1, of negative 36 and a sum of negative 16. Remember, you always take that top number and you say, what's everything that multiplies to 36? So 1 times 36, on your calculator you divide 36 divided by 2, and you get 18. But then you say to yourself, okay, how do you get negative 36? So Julius, what do I have to do to one of these numbers in order to get a negative 36? Yes, one of them has to be negative because 2 times 18 is positive 36. So in order to get it a negative 36, one of those has to be negative. If you then summed these, negative 2 plus 18 is 16. 2 plus negative 18 is negative 16. There's your answer. Your answer is positive 2 and negative 18. If it is a PSA 1 question, an inspection question, right, there's a 1 here. You set up two brackets for your answer. An X goes at the beginning of each bracket. One bracket, it does not matter which, gets a plus 2. I'll put it on the right-hand bracket. And the other bracket gets a negative 18. Those are your two factors. Okay, for C. Scratch out C, and we're going to change it. What if you see this question? Please write down negative 24 minus 2x plus x squared. What do you think you would do? Negative 24 minus 2x plus x squared. I'll tell you right now, this is a PSA 1 question, but you've never seen it like this. So two people know. So Ainsley and Tristan, Nicole, Angel, Evan. Evan, what would you do? Yeah, not flip it. You would rewrite it in descending order of x. Yeah. So if you see this, you just say, okay, we've never factored it looking like this with the constant first. So you would rewrite this. You'd write x squared first, then you'd write minus 2x, then minus 24. From here, you'd say, oh, this is a PSA 1, this is an inspection question. And you'd set up your chart. What gives you a product of negative 24 and a sum of negative 2. So again, 1 in 24, 2 in 12. What's 24 divided by 3? 3 and 8, so I'll write that, even though that's not going to be it. What's 24 divided by 4? 4 and 6. Okay, so you say you got to get a negative 24. So it's either negative 4, positive 6, or 4 and negative 6. Jackson, which one would it be to get the negative 2? 4 and negative 6. You would set up your two brackets. One bracket would give you x plus 4, and one would be x minus 6. Okay, let's do D, 4 terms. Juan, what do you want me to do with 4 terms? Split it in half and find the GCF. So between a 24x squared and a 30x, Juan, what do you want me to factor out of that? Yeah, 6x. That goes in front of your bracket, and the answer goes in the bracket. So 24 divided by 6 is 4x minus 30 divided by 6 is 5, and your x's here will cancel. You then go to the right-hand side. Do you know what would be the GCF of a 36 and a 45? 9. Plus 9 or minus 9? Plus 9. Whatever that is, that sign. So it would be a positive 9. And you would say, okay, 36 divided by 9 is 4. Here you have a negative divided by a positive, which would give you a negative. And 45 divided by 9 is 6. Oh, no. What's 45 divided by 9? Yeah, 5. You would check that your two brackets are the same, and then you've done the factoring by decomposition correctly. So 4x minus 5, you factor that out. Oh, I like this question actually. 6x plus 9. This would actually be worth 3 marks. Do you see what would have to happen? Look at your two factors. One of them is not completely factored. Yep, this guy here. So you say there's nothing you could take out from a 4 and a 5 except a 1, right? But this one, a 6 and a 9, you could take out what number? A 3. So that would be, let's see, you'd have 4x minus 5. You would have the 3 that you factor out. The answer would be 6 divided by 3 is 2x plus 3. And then would you hand this in, or would you rewrite this? Yeah, rewrite it with the 3 in front. So the 3 goes in front, and then it doesn't matter which factor comes second. So I'll put the 4x minus 5, and then the 2x plus 3. And that's why this would have been a 3-mark question, because there would have been 3 factors. Okay, for E, I want you guys to scratch this one out. I'm going to give you a different one. Just got to think of it for a second. So write down for me 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. So a lot of you would look at that, say 3 terms. The A value is not 1, it's a PSA 2. It is a PSA 2. Before you do that, though, always check, can you factor out that 4? You can't factor out that 4 to turn it into a PSA 1. And there's no GCF. So it's going to be a true PSA 2. Okay, so let's set up our chart. Product, sum, answer. The product that we're looking for is 9 times 4, which is 36. The sum that we're looking for is 12. So again, 1 and 36, right? And then you'd say 36 divided by 2. So 2 and 18. 36 divided by 3. 3 and 12. 36 divided by 4. 4 and 9. 36 is not divisible by 5. 36 divided by 6 is 6. And you would say, which one of these answers when summed would give you 12? Erin, do you know what the answer would be? 6 and 6. Yep. So the answer would be 6 and 6. This is a PSA 2, which is decomposition. So you take that middle term and you say to yourself, how do you get 12 x's? 6x plus 6x. Like, how do you get 12 x's using your answer? So 6x plus 6x gives you 12 x's. You bring down that plus 9, and you bring down that 4x squared. I'm just going to clean this up. And then from here, you've got 4 terms. You split those terms in half, and you group factor. 2x squared and a 6x. Nicole, what do you want me to take out of there? Between a 4x squared and a 6x. 2x. And you would get 2x plus 3. Caleb B, 6x and a 9. What can I factor from a 6 and a 9? 3. Remember, you always take out the sign of that term. And you would get 6x divided by 3 is 2x plus 3. Remember, for decomposition or PSA 2, those two brackets must be the same in order to know that you've done this correctly. Ainsley, what would be your second factor? Okay, this is called a perfect square. So we never did any examples that were perfect squares, but I'll show you guys why this is the perfect square. That's exactly what it would be. So this 2x plus 3, 2x plus 3 could be rewritten as 2x plus 3 squared. So this question, if ever you get an answer that both factors are the same, it's called a perfect square, okay? And you're always going to have a perfect square, Ainsley, if your answer here would have the same two numbers, right? That would be a perfect square. Yeah. So this is, you could do it by PSA 2, right? 2x plus 3 times 2x plus 3. And then you could just realize that if it was a multiple choice question, this might not be a selection. It might be this guy, because you'd have to say, oh, it's a perfect square. That is it for the 4 different types of factoring. That's what you need to know for factoring on your exam on Thursday. So I'm going to give you some practice questions, and you're going to work through these, not very many at all, and then I will give you a practice exam and a practice test in your workbook. Okay, so let's talk about some of these. Question 1. So let's write a few things. You are going to do all of 1. You don't have to do G or I. What method of factoring would x squared minus 49 be? Difference of squares. So what I want you guys to do right now, set up your 2 brackets. You should be able to do this one in like 10 seconds. Tristan, what would the answer be for, I think I tilted. What would the answer be for this guy? Sorry, what would it be? X minus 7 and x plus 7. This is a difference of squares. And on your test, they should be that fast. What will B be? Am I going to write a 1 or a 2? 1. This is going to be an inspection or a PSA question. What do you guys think about C? Let's do C together. It's just going to be a GCF of 8. If you factor out the 8, you're going to get a 1x squared plus 4. And then some people would think, oh, that's a difference of squares, right? Because I could square root the 1x squared and I could square root 4. But what excludes this from being a difference of squares? What's wrong with this? It has to be a minus here, right? That's why this guy is a difference of squares. Two terms separated by a minus. There's no GCF here. So H would be a difference of squares. And that would be your answer. Okay, circle D. That's going to be a group factoring. So if you want, you could split those 4 terms in half. Circle E, you could write a number 2. This is going to be a decomposition question. So once you figure out your answer, split that negative 5p. F, hopefully you see, is going to be an inspection or PSA 1 question. Flip your page. I want you to circle 2A, 2C. What will A be? PSA 2 or decomp. Yeah. What will C be? Difference of squares. Okay. Circle D. It is going to be a difference of squares, but before it's a difference of squares, what will it be? A GCF. Of what number do you think? 3. So figure out what that would be. Actually, I'll just give it to you. 108 divided by 3, 36 minus z squared. F, I want you to circle. There's a GCF first. The GCF would actually be the 8. 32 is divisible by 8, as is 96. Once you take out that 8, would it be a PSA 1 or a PSA 2 question? It would be a PSA 1, because you're going to get a 1v squared. Okay, so that's all I want you to do for that. Let's look at number 3. I want you to do D. Can you please rewrite D right now for me? So it's got to always be in descending order of X, or in this case, descending order of G. So it would be that guy first, that guy second, and the constant is last. Actually, to review one thing as well for Thursday, the 5 is the constant. What's the leading coefficient of this? 6. When it's in descending order, the leading coefficient is what leads the pack, which would be the 6. What would the degree of this polynomial expression be? 2. Yeah. If I said to you, what is the leading coefficient plus the constant, and it was a numerical response, what would the answer be? 11. Leading coefficient 6 plus 5 would give you 11. I'm just going to look down at G. Let me see. Circle G. Split this in half. Oh, wait a second. You know what? There's a problem with G. And actually, I wouldn't give this on the exam, but this would be a 20-1 question. Okay, the way I have it written right now, what is wrong with this? There's no GCF, right, between an x squared and a y. So what I want you to do is flip these two terms, and you would get x squared minus x plus y minus xy. From here now, If you split it in half, you're able to group factor. So I won't do that for you on this test. Like if you get 4 terms, you're going to simply be able to split in half. If ever you can't, though, like in 20-1, you say to yourself, can I flip something in here? And then sure enough, you'll be able to group factor. Okay. And then let me just look at, this will be the last one for 3. It is going to be a GCF first. GCF would not be 12. Do you know what the GCF would be between a 12, not 6? No, because 12 and 8 aren't divisible. 4. And then it will be a PSA 2 or a decomp question. And then just let me look at, I'm just looking at the last, number 5 is good. What would you guys think for this one? PSA 1, PSA 2, GCF, what would you do here? Yep, GCF first, 5. And then you would get 1x squared minus 2x minus 3. From there, it would be an inspection or PSA 1 question. And then number 6 is good as well. Number 6, the reason why this one is good is because you essentially have to do 4 different types of factoring to see which one this is an answer of. Can you guys look at, how would you factor number 3? What do you guys think for number 3? GCF, yeah. What would the GCF of this guy be? Okay, so we'll set this one up, 3x. What do you guys think about number 4? Is it a difference of squares? 2 terms, what must it be separated by for it to be a difference of squares? A minus. So this is the one that would trick people. Students would look at this and they would say, oh, it's x minus 4, x plus 4. It is not. If you have 2 terms separated by a positive, you cannot do a difference of squares. So this one here would actually be not factorable. And remember before I told you, there will be one question, it's going to be like a multiple choice question. Which of the following is not factorable by difference of squares? You cannot have 2 terms. Both of these, yes, they can be square rooted, but they must be separated by a negative in order for it to be a difference of squares. So now going through that, you just need to finish factoring 3. This is going to be a GCF, maybe difference of squares. I'm not sure when you take out that 3. This guy would be a PSA 2 or decomp. Okay, I'll give you as much time as you need for that, and then I'll hand out those practice exams for you.